An officer finds a little girl sitting alone in a mall parking lot. When he kneels beside her and gently asks why she's there, she looks up and whispers, "Mommy doesn't want me home." What began as a simple welfare check slowly unravels into something far deeper and far more heartbreaking. Stay with us, because this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, abandonment, and what it truly means to be chosen. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Officer Marcus Reed had walked every stretch of Briarwood Commons Mall more times than he could count. In his 18 years with Eastwood PD, this place had become a second home, a pulse he could read in his sleep. On most nights, the final hour of patrol was the quietest. A hush settled over the sprawling parking lot like a drawn curtain. But that evening, something offbeat caught his eye, a presence that didn't belong in the fading light. Near the far edge of the lot, tucked between two parked SUVs, sat a child. She couldn't have been more than 3, her tiny frame nearly hidden behind a rusted shopping cart. Her dress was wrinkled, and her shoes didn't match. A fraying teddy bear dangled from her arm, its stuffing leaking through the seams. What struck Marcus wasn't the image itself, it was the unnatural stillness. The kind of stillness that didn't come from fear, but from instruction. Like someone had told her to sit, stay, and wait. He approached slowly, letting his years of training guide his every step. Crouching beside her, he softened his tone. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name's Marcus. Are you all right? Where's your family?" The girl turned her head toward him, her expression quiet and unreadable. When she finally spoke, her words were barely more than a breath. "Mom doesn't want me home." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Calm, certain, without tears or confusion. As if she had accepted it long before he arrived. He knelt a little closer and asked her name. "Amira," she answered softly. No last name, no hesitation. He offered his hand, and she placed her small fingers into his with quiet trust. He led her inside the mall where the security team quickly issued a public announcement. Her name echoed through the intercom. "Will the parent or guardian of Amira please report to the information desk?" It was repeated every few minutes as the building emptied. Employees packed up, shoppers made their final purchases, and the lights began to dim, but no one came. Amira sat on the bench outside the office, clutching her teddy bear, her legs swinging just above the floor. She didn't ask about her mother, didn't scan the crowd. She simply waited, as if she already knew no one would come. Marcus watched her closely. This wasn't a case of a lost child. There was a knowing in her stillness, something far too heavy for someone so small to carry. He crouched beside her once more. "Did your mom tell you to wait here?" Amira nodded, her eyes drifting to the darkening glass doors. "She said someone kind would come. Someone better." Marcus said nothing. There was nothing to say. The building closed, the corridors emptied, and in that quiet, he made a decision. She wouldn't be handed off to a stranger tonight. He gently lifted her into his arms and carried her to his cruiser. As he buckled her into the back seat, she looked up at him and asked, "Are you kind?" He met her gaze in the mirror, the weight of her question settling deep in his chest. "I hope so," he answered. And with those 4 words, the course of both their lives began to shift. Back at the precinct, the quiet hum of overhead lights filled the empty hallways as Marcus carried Amira inside. It was nearing midnight, but paperwork could wait. What couldn't wait was the small girl in his arms who hadn't cried, hadn't spoken another word, and hadn't once asked for her mother. He brought her to a quiet office just past the main desk, where the soft glow of a desk lamp spilled across stacks of case files and a cluttered bulletin board. He tapped gently on the doorframe. Serena Vaughn looked up, surprised but not alarmed. As one of the department's most trusted officers, and a single mother to a girl not much older than Amira, Serena was known for her calm presence and clear judgment in delicate situations. Without needing explanation, Serena stood and came forward. "She's young," she whispered, crouching to eye level. "What's her name?" "Amira Bell," Marcus replied. "No ID, no missing persons report, nothing in the system. Just her sitting outside a shopping mall saying her mom doesn't want her anymore." Serena placed a soft hand on Amira's shoulder and led her into the office. She offered her a juice box and a small bunny plush from her daughter's desk drawer. Amira accepted them both quietly, sitting cross-legged on the worn leather couch. Serena spoke gently, asking simple questions, but Amira gave no more than a name and a few cryptic lines, something about a house with blue doors. It was the only detail that stood out. Marcus stepped into the adjoining room and began running searches. Missing children, runaway guardians, recent evictions, CPS reports. His screen blinked back blank after blank. No Amira Bell matched any record across state lines. She hadn't been reported missing. Not by a parent, not by a neighbor, not by anyone. She doesn't exist on paper, he muttered, half to himself, half to Serena as she joined him later. At least not under that name. Serena leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What do you want to do? Marcus looked through the glass window into the small office. Amira had fallen asleep curled on the couch, the bunny tucked under her chin, her hand still wrapped around the teddy bear she'd been found with. I want to find the house with the blue doors, he said. It's the only thing she's holding on to. Serena nodded. You think the mother really just left her? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But if she did, it wasn't out of cruelty. That girl wasn't dropped off like trash. She was planted. Like someone was hoping she'd be found by the right person. Serena glanced once more at the sleeping child. Then maybe she was. Marcus didn't reply. But deep down, he knew that moment, quiet and heavy as it was, had changed everything. He wasn't just solving a case. He was stepping into a story that had already begun long before he arrived. The next morning, the skies over Eastwood hung low and gray, casting a soft gloom over the neighborhoods Marcus had patrolled for years. But today, his patrol wasn't official. His badge was on, but this was personal. He had a name, a city, and a child's memory to go on, and a single image drawn in crayon before she fell asleep, a square house with bright blue doors, stars above the roof, and one word scribbled near the bottom corner, home. Eastwood wasn't a large city, but it had its blind spots, neighborhoods overlooked, pockets forgotten by both maps and maintenance crews. Those were the places Marcus searched first. He drove slowly, turning down side streets where houses sagged behind broken fences and paint peeled from siding like old skin. His eyes scanned each doorstep, each color, dismissing dull grays and rotting greens, until finally, midway down a narrow lane, his car came to a halt. There it was. The house stood behind an overgrown hedge and a rusted gate, its bright blue doors startling against the surrounding decay. A wide porch stretched across the front, sagging slightly at the edges. The yard was littered with broken toys, their colors faded by sun and time. One window was cracked, another boarded. Yet something about it felt familiar. He stepped inside cautiously, announcing himself out of habit, though he knew no one would answer. The interior smelled of dust and damp wood. Furniture sat abandoned. Dishes were still in the sink, as if someone had left mid-breakfast and never returned. Toys lay scattered across the floor. Blocks, a rubber ball, a single doll missing its head. A faded baby blanket lay draped across the couch. Marcus moved room by room, taking in the quiet. There were no signs of violence, no broken locks or kicked-in doors, just silence. And the haunting sense of lives paused mid-sentence. In the hallway, something odd caught his attention, a bookshelf slightly misaligned with the wall. Curious, he tugged at it gently. It shifted. Behind it was a door, not a closet, a hidden room. He stepped inside, heart tight in his chest. The space was small, windowless, and almost eerily preserved. A thin mattress rested neatly in the corner. On the opposite wall, a set of children's books had been arranged carefully on a makeshift shelf. Tucked beside them was a folder. Inside were letters, some written in a trembling hand, others never mailed. They were addressed to a place Marcus knew by name but had never visited, Hope Haven Outreach Center. He scanned the pages. The first letter began, "To whom it may concern, my name is Jade Bell." His hand trembled as he read, "Jade Bell, Amira Bell." The pieces were beginning to align, but the story was darker and far more fragile than he expected. The mother hadn't vanished. She had been reaching out, desperate, writing to someone, anyone, asking for help she clearly never received. Marcus folded the letters gently and placed them in a secure folder. The house with blue doors wasn't just a memory. It was the place Amira had been loved and then left behind. But the question now wasn't just where she had come from. It was why her mother had disappeared and what she'd been trying to protect her from. The next morning, the blue envelope from the hidden room sat like a weight on Marcus's desk. Every letter inside bore the same return address, 817 Ellis Street, Hope Haven Outreach Center. He had passed by it countless times on patrol, a modest brick building nestled between an abandoned church and a laundromat. Until now, it had been just another quiet corner of Eastwood. Now, it held the missing pieces of a mother's last attempt to be heard. When Marcus arrived, the receptionist greeted him with practiced calm. After explaining who he was and showing the letters, she brought out the program director. a middle-aged woman named Carol Green. Her eyes widened the moment she saw the name Jade Bell. "Yes," Carol said softly. "She came to us a few times over the past year. We tried to help, but she never stayed long. Said she didn't want to take up space, that she was managing." She paused, her voice thickening. "But she wasn't." Carol led Marcus to her office and retrieved Jade's intake forms. Scanning the records, Marcus saw scattered dates, visits spaced months apart, each briefer than the last. In the margin of one form were medical notes: stage 4 lupus, no family support, no known partner, one child, age 3. "She said her body was giving up faster than she expected," Carol explained. "She was trying to get her affairs in order, but she didn't have much. She never asked for money. She asked for time, for advice, and once, for a safe place for her daughter if anything happened to her." Marcus sat back, absorbing it all. The hidden room, the pristine books, the letters never sent. Jade hadn't abandoned Amira. She had been fighting a losing battle, trying to give her daughter something more stable than a hospital deathbed or a child welfare system that would forget her name. "Why didn't you take her in permanently?" he asked gently. Carol looked down. "We're full more often than we'd like to admit. The wait lists are long. She'd leave before we could call her back. I think she was already preparing to disappear." Marcus exhaled slowly. The pieces were falling into place. Jade Bell had no one, no safety net. And still, she hadn't just vanished. She'd made a deliberate, painful decision to leave her daughter in a public place where someone kind might find her, where a stranger might do what the system hadn't noticed. He asked if anyone knew what became of Jade. Carol hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thin hospital transfer document from 2 weeks prior. Jade Bell had been admitted under a false name. She had collapsed just blocks from the shelter, alone, and passed away days later in palliative care. No ID, no visitors, no one to claim the body. The staff had filed her under unidentified female, unaware she was the same woman who had begged them for help months earlier. Marcus closed his eyes. She died quietly, likely believing her daughter would never know what happened, or whether she was safe. He returned to the station that evening and stood for a long time outside the office, where Amira now played quietly under Serena's watch. She didn't look like a girl who had been abandoned. She looked like a child waiting for someone to tell her it was okay to grow again. Marcus knew now she hadn't been lost. She had been left in hope, and he had been the one meant to find her. In the days that followed, Marcus worked tirelessly to uncover anything else that might help Amira. He had already confirmed her mother's identity, traced her last steps, and even obtained the hospital file that would allow Jade Bell's death certificate to be formally issued. But one question still remained. Was there anyone else? Anyone Amira could be connected to? Someone who might come forward even now? He returned to the abandoned house, combing every room for overlooked clues. In a kitchen drawer, beneath expired coupons and brittle paper scraps, he found it. A sealed envelope addressed only to Amira's father. There was no name, no return address. But inside was a handwritten note in Jade's unmistakable script. "If you ever come back and find this, please know she's not here. I had to leave her somewhere safe. I don't know where you are or who you've become, but if you loved her at all, let her go. Don't follow." The words were less a plea than a warning. Marcus brought the note back to the station and had it analyzed for prints. Within hours, the lab matched a partial to a man named Deshaun Cole, a former street-level dealer from Eastwood with a history of assault and drug trafficking. No current address. Last known location, a halfway house in Atlanta. But he'd vanished over a year ago. No contact, no trace. Marcus didn't need more. He understood now why Jade had hidden, why she'd never put Amira into the system, why she'd chosen abandonment over exposure. It wasn't cowardice, it was protection. He filed a formal declaration with Child Protective Services, stating that Amira had no viable guardians or relatives. Then, with Serena's help, he began the long process of securing legal custody. The paperwork was dense, but it felt right, and by the time Amira began calling him Uncle Marcus without being asked, he knew he had already made the decision in his heart. Weeks passed. The house with blue doors was boarded up for demolition. Jade Bell was given a proper burial through a community fund, and Marcus made sure Amira would one day be old enough to visit, understand, and remember. One evening, he came home late after a shift. Amira was asleep on the couch, her favorite blanket tucked around her, the bunny plush tucked under one arm, the old teddy bear under the other. On the table beside her was a drawing, bright colors this time, not crayon gray shadows. It was of their house. But this one had two figures in the doorway, a tall man in uniform and a small girl with stars above her head. Marcus picked up the drawing and for a moment just stood in the quiet, feeling something shift deep inside him. He had started this journey asking where the child had come from, but somewhere along the way, he realized the more important question was where they were both going now. Years passed, but Marcus never forgot the first night Amira asked him if he was kind. It had been a question posed with innocence, but carved out of pain, a test of the world, spoken by a child who had already learned too much about disappointment. And somehow, in that single moment, without a title or a promise, she had chosen to trust him. By the time she was 8, Amira Bell Reed had grown into a curious, headstrong girl with a love for drawing and an uncanny ability to read people's moods. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and knew every inch of their little Eastwood neighborhood. Her favorite color was still blue, and when asked why, she'd say it reminded her of doors that open and stars that don't disappear. Marcus, now grayer at the temples and softer around the edges, had become more than her guardian. He was her family. He attended parent-teacher conferences, baked birthday cupcakes badly, and built her a bookshelf shaped like a tree. Their home was filled with reminders of the life they had built together, photos, art, letters, and on one wall, a framed drawing Amira had made long ago. The blue-doored house with the words, "Mom said someone kind would come." Every year on the anniversary of Jade Bell's passing, Marcus and Amira visited her grave. They brought flowers and paper stars, Amira's idea. She would kneel and whisper things Marcus never intruded on, then stand up, take his hand, and walk back to the car in silence. It was her ritual, her way of stitching past to present. As she grew older, Marcus told her everything, not all at once, but piece by piece, gently and honestly, about her mother's illness, about the shelter letters, about the abandoned house and the decision made not out of neglect, but fierce love. And when Amira asked if her father ever tried to find her, Marcus told her the truth. He chose not to be part of your story, but your mother fought for you until the end. Years later, when Amira stood in front of her graduating class as valedictorian, she opened her speech with a line no one forgot. "I was once left in a parking lot, and I've never been more found." After the ceremony, Marcus hugged her tightly, pride bursting in his chest. He never imagined his life would lead here, not through a police report, not through a whisper in the dark, not through grief. But here they were, two people brought together by a stranger's last hope and a child's quiet strength. And though Amira never called him Dad out loud, she didn't need to. When she reached for his hand in a crowd, or when she left him sticky notes that read, "You're the best ever," or when she once whispered, "Thanks for not leaving," Marcus understood exactly who he had become. In finding her, he had found himself, and together they had proven that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the places we're least expected to look. Have you ever been someone's second chance, or has someone ever been yours? Feel free to tell us your story in the comments. If this story touched you, share it with someone who believes family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.